Let me be a little kinder, let me be a little blinder.
Viewers, it's good to be back. Today I am my unsung hero. This show is dedicated to unsung heroes, survivors, and champions for justice. And the person whom I'm honored to host today is someone I met when I was a teenager, when we used to go for the camps, Christian camps, and they were slightly older than us, so they mentored us and they guided us. And the story that brings us back together almost 30 years was about the very thing he taught me when I was young, which was kindness. And back then he used to love music, and he'd play the guitar, and I would sing along. And there was a song that he taught me that had the lyrics, let me be a little kinder, let me be a little blinder to the faults of those around me, let me love a little more, let me be a little cheery when my brother is weary, think a little more of others and a little less of me. Victor Kamau. Karibu.
Asante sana.
So maybe you can introduce yourself, Father. We like titles, we like to know where people have been, where they've come from. Then I can connect what you do to how we met later in life.
Thank you very much, Redemptor. My name is Victor Kamau. I am an advocate, and I work with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So I am a human rights defender, and above all, I very much love the Lord, and struggle to make Him known, or rather strive to make Him known through my work, through my interaction with friends and others, and through my life as a whole.
Amen. So I met Victor in a Christian camp, and almost 30 years. I think, Victor, it has been almost, 40 years?
40 years.
40 years. It
In
could
the
be.
80s.
Yes, so 40 years ago, this is who he was back then. And a very special story, because I've written a book about allowing adversity to shape our lives and build our faith. When I wrote this book, I was struggling with who would even look at the content of my book. But I'd honored people who had impacted me in my life. And Victor became one of them because of a case that I encountered. And when I wanted people to review my book or to authorize me to mention them in my book, people are very, very busy. And I felt like Victor is a very senior man, has a lot of work. He's the last person who's going to review my book. But he did, and that's how this book came to be. I just needed one person to believe in me enough to say it's a good book. And the reason why it was in the book is because I help people face adversity. And I met a girl in church. She was a young woman. She was in her 30s, was going through a very difficult marriage. And everything fell apart for her while she was in Kenya. And she was a foreigner. And people didn't know how to handle her because she felt betrayed. She was a bit lost. She ended up in civil jail for defying a court order to produce her children in court. And I tried everything to make her feel like she can overcome this problem. And when I went to see her in Langata Women, she was so angry. She told me, Redemptor, I've tried everything and no lawyer would understand me. And she said, the only kind person I have met in Kenya and the only good lawyer I've met who seems to understand my predicament is one Victor Kamau. And I was so excited because I knew there can only be one Victor Kamau who is kind because he had taught me to be kind so many years back. So Victor, that's how we get reconnected, because Susan gives me your number. So what was different, what made this woman in distress feel unjudged and loved in your presence? Because my channel is about unsung heroes, and people cannot blow their own trumpet. But there's something that a conversation you had with her probably, that made her feel unjudged. So do you remember her? Do you remember her case?
I remember her case. It was difficult because she was dealing with an obviously very hurtful situation where her husband had turned against her, and she was in a foreign land, and she was fiercely protective of her child. And because of that, she fell foul of the legal system, because she perceived that the husband was influential and strong and wanted to take the child away from her, and was using the courts to do that. And so she said, over my dead body, I will not go to that court. And of course, when you get to that, there's nothing that can happen except the court will put you in jail. And I was trying to explain to her, you know, the complications of disobeying court orders, but really I understood why she was disobeying the court orders. And I just felt there was very little, very many people, very many of us could do to help her. It was a maternal issue against the established system. And it just really made me feel very...
compassion, if you had compassion.
Well, yes, it made me feel compassion for her. I prayed for her and I tried to guide her as much as I could. And I'm very glad if she found me a blessing, because that is really why we live.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to be a little kinder, that's what God would have us be.
Absolutely.
And apart from the technical know-how you had, she sensed the compassion. It probably how you communicated to her. And I think she had been through a lot of lawyers. She could not even afford one, you know. So this story sadly has a sad ending, because Susan ended up dying in Kenya. Medical reasons, not because of this case. But I remember when I went to see her in jail, apart from reminding me that Victor had been kind to her, I was also very tough on her. I kept saying, now you're in jail, the very children you're trying to protect are with strangers and they could face harm wherever they are. Please tell me where your children are. So we had a bit of a fight, and I convinced her to give me the number of our relatives back from her country. And I remember the last words Susan ever said to me when she was well is, Redemptor, I know you care about me. Redemptor, I know you love me. So for me, that is the happy ending of a sad case where she had experienced kindness from Victor, and she was convinced that I cared about her. And that's why we do everything we do is guided by love and being able to empathize. And Victor brings me to some who are not Christians will call it philanthropy, being a humanitarian, and others will call it empathy. But does it have a price when you feel painful for other people, apart from just being a lawyer and doing it because of your faith? Is there a price we pay when we feel, I call them feeling all the feels?
I don't know about a price,
Yes.
because really what I want to do is motivated by my faith. And all these humanitarian, philanthropic, all that, there is fatigue for sure. There is fatigue for sure. But when it is a matter of doing it because that is what you need to do to be God's feet and hands on earth, to be God's representative in your context, then you can always go to Him for strength.
Okay.
Yes.
We've had a conversation about you growing up, and we've talked about the challenges that come with, because you can imagine a lot of people who've faced challenges either use that strength that they've gained from their challenge, their adversity, and others then become victims. And I've mentioned to you about people that you probably went to the same school with, who are on the streets begging because there was no opportunity for them or what. But I've always been curious, and I've never had the courage to ask you. So maybe I can ask today that how was it growing up and ending up doing law when back in the day probably the facilities that were there for learning, that are there today, were not there back then?
Yes, I like saying I don't like to remember the days, especially when there were no computers, no mobile phones. They were okay, let's say interesting days, because they also shaped our character. I have to say also, growing up was a challenge coming to know myself as an adolescent, and then going to university where there weren't as many people who had, a visual disability like me. But actually, I have to say that the thing that has blessed me a lot is the kindness of others, even strangers. Even strangers. I received a lot of it, and it really was something. It's always something that gives me a lot of courage, and also teaches me to be sensitive to the problems of others, to be compassionate, to know that there are things I can do to help, and to really strive to do those things. Yeah.
So sometimes if you think when you're different in a way, you're differently abled, that's what people notice about you. But you'll be surprised that as a young girl, I like to hang around you in the camp, not because I was guiding you around, but because of the way you spoke. You could articulate. I mean, this was a village girl who had teachers speaking English, but there was a way you communicated. And then there are other skills that you had that we don't have, like you could play instruments. So how did music and learning how to play instruments, and I mean, you're extra gifted apart from being kind. And is it because when you don't have one sense, your other senses are heightened? Or is this just a gift that you could play all these instruments?
I think one thing that I always will be grateful for, and I always say, maybe that's why God decided that I should have a visual disability, is that I had an excellent education. The school I went to, starting from primary, had a culture of music, a culture of debating, a culture of just holistically molding students. And I think that is one thing that I benefited from very much. And I took to music. I really took to music, and enjoyed myself very much playing in my school band, in the brass band, and also playing the piano. I think it was so therapeutic, and it blessed me. It blessed me a lot.
Where did you go to school?
I went to the Thika School for the Blind for my primary and secondary school. Okay. Then I went to Thika High School for A-level.
Okay. So A-level was the first school or institution that you went to that was now for, you are the only one who was?
There are two of us. Okay. There are two of us. And strangely, we actually contributed uniquely to the school. to the school's extracurricular culture. I remember in Thika High School, I took over the Christian Union Choir, and we actually scooped prizes in music competitions.
The Kenya National Music.
Yes, and so nationally, and it was just also such a blessing to me to just see myself, you know, enjoying the ebb and flow of the place, and really just being, you know, myself.
University of Nairobi, how is that? Was that different from?
The University of Nairobi was very interesting indeed. I read law there, and it was a very, very interesting place also, because one, it was a big place. It was a very big place, and there was just a different culture altogether. I came to discover very many new friends, and some of the people who helped me with my reading, because there were no computers that time, no personal computers. And you can imagine a Braille book is extremely huge. Like only one book of contract called Cheshire and Fivefoot was actually 33 volumes. Wow. That is just one book. Wow. So where do you even keep it in the room?
Where do you buy it from that time? How many needed it in the university?
It was availed for me from England.
Wow.
And so what really used to happen was that bands of volunteers used to read for me, and they would read onto tape some of the most important articles and journals, and I would take notes from them, and you know, God also gave me a very good memory at that time.
Okay. I imagine it's still there.
It's still there, but of course the science of age.
Yes,
you know.
yes, and technology then
And
improvised.
technology,
Improvised
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think now I just don't bother to remember too much, because I can always save it onto computers.
Yes.
And I remember I used to know my phone numbers off head. No longer.
It's no longer necessary.
No longer necessary.
But I feel like you are two worlds where you had to give back, in the sense of here you are compassionate about justice, even probably at an early age, and then giving back to the community that was so kind to you. Do you have like friends from the University of Nairobi that you've kept to date from the reading, those helpers for reading?
It's amazing, and some of them are judges, some of them are doctors.
Wow.
I mean, you know, the who is who. And I mean, it's just amazing. That's why I'm saying I have really, really benefited a lot from the kindness of strangers.
The most memorable, though, of course, you can't mention one and leave others, but probably at a low point, someone that came through for you in all those stages, probably in your primary, in your secondary. There must have, I mean, I assume you still had all the challenges that come with being a young person. Did you ever get a breaking point, rebellion? I know you were a Christian youth counselor, but was there a season in your life that...
Well, I would say it was never a straight line. And I actually also learned that it was God who made intellect. And He's not bothered, He's not challenged when we ask questions. When we ask questions because we want to be guided. And when we wonder about things, you know, Some people say that is rebelling. But it is actually a natural empirical process of thinking and reconciling things. And the bottom line is that God is always with us. Yes, so it's not a straight line, and there are wilderness experiences.
Did you count your blessings more, or were there moments of why me? I mean, everybody goes through moments of why me. Were yours lashing out loud, or they were quiet? Some of us lash out loud.
I think I'm a pensive, meditative kind of person. But I have to say, that the times when I was happy and excited and walking around and visiting friends were much more than the times I was, feeling sorry for myself. But yeah.
The music helps. We all like to be around you because of the music. We'd like to be around you because of you, but then you used music to bring us together and bring so much joy. Like everybody wants Victor to play for them a song and also sing along. So we get to that point where a few weeks ago I met a lady who is also a helper, who is a defender of rights. And it was such a joy for your name to come up. She started to share a story about defending people and then finding out maybe they're not so innocent. And then your name came up. And what was so interesting for me for the second time, apart from the story of this lady who was going through distress, was again this lady called Joyce, who is still now in a project that helps the wrongfully convicted or charged, was saying about a case that was a turning point for her. But what I remembered from that conversation, I hope to have her as a guest, then she can share experiences. And again, also use this moment to ask people who've encountered Victor to comment on our show and just maybe share a story. Maybe he would love to hear this part of his life that maybe he doesn't know the people he has touched over the years. But what I remember about the conversation I had with Joyce is he said he used to be a volunteer. So even before you joined an organization, you used to volunteer and give pro bono work to cases. Where were you before an organization? Were you in private practice? Where were you doing the pro bono work from?
Well, what actually happened is that I did my master's in London, and I actually specialized in international business law.
Oh.
And I had great ideas about how I was going to make loads of money, When I came back to Kenya and started working, my first job was with the Nairobi City Council. And I was in court prosecuting people who were not paying rates. But in those same cases, in those same courts, there were cases like criminal cases. And I used to see in the 90s, I used to see people being treated so badly because they were poor. I used to see people being beaten up by police, even right in front of the court.
Wow. The city council courts or the normal?
Sorry?
The city council courts or the normal courts?
Yeah, the city council courts were also criminal courts.
Okay.
So it was something that was so shocking to me that I said, you know what, the money can wait.
Okay.
And that is when I clearly had the call of God saying, you need to go into human rights work. And then I had a series of sermons by Reverend Mutava Musiemi. He was then at the Nairobi Baptist.
Yes.
And there were sermons on the book of Amos. And the whole thing about social justice really came clear, very clear to me. And that is when we started doing pro bono work. And I got involved with the Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship and co-founded the Christian Lawyers Education Aid and Research to empower poor people who couldn't afford advocates. And that's where I actually met Joyce, and she's a big, huge blessing.
Okay. Wow. So those are the people who come back and kind of give information. Now there's something else that'll make you uncomfortable. My unsung heroes don't want to come to my show sometimes because they say, we want to do these things in private. We don't want people to know what we are doing. But another story that has come up is I have contacted you many, many times when I have been faced with a case that I don't know what to do with. So you've given me legal advice, and in a few occasions, you have also said, I am sending you something small to enable you to do this exercise. And so I heard of another story where you found a case. Of course, we can't disclose all the details of these cases. But this particular case, maybe you don't even know that the person shared that you went out of your way from your own pocket and gave this person an opportunity to start life over again. So now the giving part of you, not just giving services, does it then compel where you say the fatigue comes in, where you still have to go to your pocket and help?
I think one thing that I have learned from the Lord is that a poor person, a really poor person, a pauper, a pathetic pauper, is a person who has money in the bank, loads of it, and sees people suffering and needing it, and he can't part with it. That, to me, is a pauper.
Wow.
A serious pauper.
It's profound. Well, they think they have everything. So if the person who doesn't share is the poorest person.
Oh, he's very poor.
Okay.
He's pathetically poor. Of course, I don't have a lot of money to give, but there are cases where it is the right thing to do, and God will guide you individually. Because as a lawyer, of course, you must be statistical. And you can't afford to get emotionally involved. In many cases, you will be in serious trouble. Okay. But there are those one-offs where God will just tell you, this is the way you should go, and there you go.
Okay. So many people have benefited from Victor's generosity. It is compassion with wisdom. That's what he's talking about, statistics, that you still just can't give everything, or you can't give because someone is crying. But God leads us when we are to give. Now, you move from being part of the Christian Lawyers to founding, what do you call the organization? Being a co-founder of?
Clear. It's called Clear.
Oh, Clear, that's where you met Joyce, yes. So to that organization?
That organization is an organization that is an organization after my own heart, because it was founded as an intervention by Christian lawyers. Okay. It's actually a project of the Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship. Okay. And every lawyer who is a Christian is a member of that organization. And what we do is that we try to inculcate the Christian principles in the justice system. And we do that by, giving service, free legal service where it is needed. Because legal representation is not cheap. but it's given free. Because we have also received from the Lord, we have been given the privilege of being elite. We can speak for society because we have a special function. So we want to give that as worship to our God and to use it to bless people. So that is clear. We are involved on a continual basis. Then I went and worked with the International Justice Mission, which is also a Christian, a faith-based law organization, legal organization. It's actually international with its headquarters in the United States. And the thing about IJM is that they were they really challenged my faith, and their projects were very, very unique. They go to rescue slaves, you know, and with children who have been trafficked in places like India and so on. And it was just a time of learning also for me, and it just prepared me for working with now my present employer, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which is a constitutional body. It's a constitutional commission which protects and promotes human rights and constitutionalism in Kenya.
Wow. So the irony of Victor gets a master's in business law. Was it business law?
Yes.
And so you're in City Kanju, and they have their reputation. So do you find the irony of where you started, and then there are all these, can I call them atrocities by city councillors carries, and the cases are now coming back to you when now at the current commission. What do you do apart from just the giving in terms of advocacy, going back to some of these organizations, knowing the culture in Kenya about unjust practices like city council really clobbering hawkers in town? Is there a room for you to go back and even give guidance?
Many times, of course, we work very positively, by the way, with agencies that enforce the law, and agencies that are involved in the coercive industry, and we always try to advocate best practices. Of course, human dignity is a very huge thing for me, and for the Commission. We try to protect the dignity of every person who comes to us and is treated with indignity. But we try to promulgate and to promote that good practice by doing many things, training public officers, interacting with them, going to court where necessary, and just promulgating policies which promote human dignity and human rights.
I want to bring now a difficult question where this has affected me. When social justice does not seem to be pushed in the church as much, you say your turning point was helped by this sermon that was given that brought out the social justice in the Christian context. Now we live in an era where we now move to prosperity gospel, and adversity is almost being looked at as almost not part of our faith. Have you encountered, because I have encountered it, where people who fight so much for social justice end up being disillusioned about their faith?
I have encountered certainly very robust discussions on what should a Christian do in terms of promoting social justice and what is the role of the church. I think you will find as many ideas as there are people. There are people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who said, sorry, because he was executed, who said that it is no point as a Christian being driven by a drunk person. You can see there's going to be an accident, and all you can do is pray. You know, you get out there, push that guy out, and you drive. There are others who believe that it is better to just keep quiet and pray. I personally, as a Christian, because of being a Christian, you really have to confront some of these injustices. And don't ever forget that Jesus actually threw people out of the temple. It is something that also sometimes gives me difficulty, but I have to say that I think we are different, and it's because God doesn't call all of us to be activists. Yeah, but I think we pray that we shall be able to stand up for what is right and to promote integrity and, you know, and live a life that guides others as to what also they should do.